I've heard a number of astrologers, or I've heard a number of astonishingly correct predictions of general patterns in the world over the last couple of years. And a couple of examples are these. Before 2020 started, most serious astrologers agreed that this year, 2020, was going to be pretty wild, starting in January. And we all know what unfolded. And in your book, Pam, you write in June of 2017 that 2020 was to be a very pivotal year with major changes in the structures of society, quote unquote, a feeling of things coming to a peak. And you wrote, this is wonderful, we will think of how life was before 2020 and then how it is after. I think
I don't remember I wrote that.
It's there. I just read it today.
I don't remember.
And there's more before you answer this or talk about this. In a video on I think the 2nd or 3rd of January, you said that you saw signs that there was still more turmoil to expect around the US election. Sure enough, the Washington Capitol was taken over by a Trump mob on January 6th. And as we record this, there is many people are talking about more violence and turmoil can be expected before the inauguration day on the 20th. So, talk about this.
Well, I don't remember I wrote that. That's quite remarkable.
Oh, you did, and it's brilliant. You said that we are in the biggest evolution of humanity in approximately 12,000 years. So what are the energies of these times? What is it with 2020 and 2021?
Wow. Okay. So a lot to say here. I think what's important.
30 seconds.
yeah. No pressure. No pressure.
No pressure.
I think what's important to say here is that every archetype of each planet is like a multifaceted diamond. So you have to stick with the core of the archetypes when I'm trying to be very strict about this in writing about astrology, because it is symbolically accurate. It is not executionally accurate. And what I mean by that is the archetypes, energy, qualities of the planets will always play out, but you can't guess at exactly how it will manifest in terms of events and experiences, because that is down to the consciousness either of the individual or the collective. Because we will manifest our reality, our astrology in different ways, depending on our level of consciousness. Yeah. We had this very kind of tough conjunction, 12th of January, as you know, 2020, between Saturn and Pluto. Saturn and Pluto tend to come into hard aspects. And by that, I mean the conjunction, the opposition, and the square, when times are tough. You know, if we go back to the 1930s, 1933 to 35, very tough, Great Depression, hard aspect between Saturn and Pluto. 9/11, opposition between Saturn and Pluto. 2020, conjunction between Saturn and Pluto that was exceptionally tough because it was in Capricorn and Saturn rules Capricorn. So that strengthened it. Now, always historically, these hard aspects are about hard times, austerity, additional control, rules and regulations, clampdowns, top-down authority. But also at the same time, in all this kind of locking down and contraction, there's another quality which is part of Pluto in Capricorn, because Pluto has a 248-year orbit. It moves very slowly, so it spends 20, 30 years in a sign. It is always about deconstructing the qualities of the sign that it moves through. So as well as the very obvious hard times, rules, regulations, top-down control from governments, at the same time, Pluto moving through Capricorn is talking about the deconstruction of top-down government, top-down corporations, institutions, authorities, whatever, big, powerful organizations are telling you what to do. It will be, that is continuing until really 2024, certainly the next 3 years, because it doesn't get out of Capricorn fully until 2024.
Pluto is going to stay in Capricorn.
Yeah,
until
it
then.
starts to move out a little bit into Aquarius in 2023, but it kind of goes back and forwards, doesn't move fully out till 2024. So that is the big, big context. So within this very tight year of constraint, at the same time, Pluto will reveal any corruption, any wrongdoing, any lack of integrity, transparency, accountability on the part of those powerful leaders of big institutions. It will reveal that. And that in turn will accelerate the collapse of the old order, because no longer will they seem like they have our best interests at heart, they are our trusted leaders, they always care for us, all of that is crumbling and will increasingly crumble over the next 3 years.
I think that's exactly what we are seeing, actually, in many places.
So, and we're in an accelerated unraveling, particularly over the next 2 months of seeing that. And the reason that will occur is that many truths will come to light. As we move into more planets being in Aquarius, Jupiter, Saturn now have moved into Aquarius out of Capricorn, that puts the momentum from the past into the future, but it also is the sign of truth. Truth, disclosure, integrity, we've got to come clean. So what will accelerate this unraveling, which is the really, really big kind of first layer on the canvas, is truths coming to light. Am I being clear here? So so that's what we're into. So 2021, I see really as a year of transition, of there's still strong attempts at control, and this is going to come in waves, but equally there are bursts of revolution towards the new. And the whole tension, I've mentioned in the last couple of videos, this huge tension between every planet, actually, every planet you look at like is sort of under tension, but it's a clash really of the old and the new, the control and the freedom, the elitism versus the egalitarianism. So this is
Uranus versus Saturn.
Absolutely. Uranus, the big Saturn and Pluto conjunction sort of ended at the end of last year. The main aspect going into 2021, which we have already, is Saturn square Uranus. By the way, that can bring up a huge amount of economic turbulence, financial turbulence, stock markets, just very volatile all over the place. But this is very interesting because this kind of message of the old and the new, control and freedom, is repeated over and over again, because, for instance, Saturn is the old, the way things have always been. It's to do with control, rules and regulations, but it's in Aquarius, the sign of the new, which is ruled by Uranus. And Uranus is, as I say, the ruler of Aquarius, and it's the revolution, the bursting through of the galactic, the high-level mind, the new, the future. It's the maverick that smashes up the old. If the old is lacking, not supporting our future growth, it will just want to smash it all up. It's the maverick, it's the breakdown to break through. But that, for the next, up to 2026, is sitting in Taurus, which is let's keep things as they are, don't rock the boat. So you have this extraordinary kind of conflict of energies, and Saturn and Uranus are in square to each other, creating tension and therefore action. So I think the whole of this year, it's a kind of one foot in the old, but increasingly one foot in the new, and watching the accelerated collapse of the new. And the level to which we feel that 3D rubber hitting the road, chaos, violence, social unrest, I think it's going to be on the 3D level, social unrest really all the way through to October. The degree to which we feel this, and this really isn't a cop-out, is our level of consciousness. Because if you're living at high frequency, somehow you're in a bubble and it doesn't really affect you. You're living in New Earth already, which isn't a place, it's a frequency. We can step into that at any moment if we can attain that frequency. And somehow circumstances just don't hit you. You're in a situation where you may not be exposed to all the difficulty and the challenge and the control. Somehow you've just got yourself in a bubble where that's the situation. So the degree to which we are going to experience this collapse, we can watch it on our eagle's perch, as I often talk about. We can observe it, but it may not affect you personally and directly if you can keep your frequency in a high enough place. So that's our mastery for this year. That's where we've got to put ourselves. But the image I keep getting is green shoots emerging from the broken concrete.
Right.
And the green shoots are in abundance already. And I think many
Is that in a concrete sense, that it might be about food production and a larger awareness of the environment and things like that?
Absolutely.
Since Uranus is in Taurus, which is a very earthbound sign.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You know astrology quite well, actually, Andy. You really do. So this is interesting because Taurus is agriculture, our food supply, our food resources, and Uranus is innovation, really. Now, you can take the shadow side of that and say, well, does that science in food production mean that there's going to be more genetically modified food? Well, that's possible. But it also means we're going to have innovation in actually going back to the simple, going back to the earth, making it organic, going back to natural principles. And I think that's a very strong wave that's happening right now, very strong zeitgeist. But there are also going to be innovations in that. I mean, there's some wonderful things happening where they're taking sort of very old warehouses and having kind of vertical agriculture where they're growing plants under different colored lights depending on what those particular vegetables or plants need to accelerate their growth, and they're all being grown beautifully and organically in a huge disused warehouse. People are planting organic vegetables on their roofs, so it insulates their homes, but they can eat their roof as well. You know, it's happening a lot even in cities. They're planting these wonderful organic gardens on the roofs of office buildings. So, all of that forward momentum, which is we haven't had up to this point, is actually very exciting in the way we can produce food enough to feed everyone without having to go via the GMO route, the scientifically modified route. When the Declaration of Independence was signed, essentially, 4th of July, 1776, that was really the so-called birth of America. And there's a birth chart for that time, 10 past 5 in the afternoon, Philadelphia, which most astrologers use. Certainly that to me is a fabulous, highly responsive chart. So that is the chart, sort of the birth chart of the US. Now, at that time in 1776, Pluto was at 27 degrees of Capricorn. Pluto has approximately a 246, 248 orbit. It varies very slightly because it's elliptical. But Pluto is essentially coming back to its natal place. It's currently in the heavens at 23 degrees of Capricorn, but it's coming down the line. It's tracking back to that 27 degrees of Capricorn, which will happen exactly next year, 2022. But we're feeling it already. It's about power issues. And really, because natal Pluto falls in the second house of that birth chart of America, that is about the economy, but it's also about the country's values. So a big part of I don't know if people have defined it this way, but it's really about who are we as America? What are our values? We've had a pretty iffy history with slavery and racism and and that, racism still continues. What are our values going forward? This is a rebirth of America that we're going through essentially. So what you're seeing in current times, and the astrology is absolutely blinding right now, it's so wild, hardly ever seen astrology like this, is it's all part of that bigger picture of the deconstruction of the old order. So I think if we can see it in those terms, that whatever kind of tough stuff is coming at you day to day on the street, in the news, that is the bigger context. And I think it's very helpful to keep that in mind. So something has to fall and collapse in order for the new to be born. So I think that's very true globally, but America is kind of leading the way in this, because whatever happens with this election is going to be much more influential on the whole earth, the whole world, than it ever has been in any other election. That's why I tend to focus on it. And also the chart of the US is being triggered pretty heavily at the moment, as you might imagine.